This is Mr. Eugene, and today we're talking about something most men experience but can't quite name. That constant low-level chaos in their marriage that never resolves, the drama that appears from nowhere, the conflicts that make no sense. The emotional storms that blow through the house for reasons he can't identify or fix. He thinks he's dealing with individual problems, bad days, stress, miscommunication. What he's actually dealing with is something far more fundamental, an addiction to chaos that some women have developed over years of never sitting still with their own thoughts, never evaluating their beliefs, never cleaning out the mental clutter that's been accumulating since childhood. And this chaos doesn't just affect her, it destroys his ability to focus, to build, to lead, to be the man he's capable of being, because you can't build anything stable on a foundation that's constantly shaking. You can't plan when plans get disrupted daily. You can't think clearly when you're perpetually managing someone else's emotional weather. This isn't about all women. This is about a specific pattern that's absolutely devastating to marriages. And the worst part is, the women operating this way don't even recognize it as dysfunction because society has told them their chaos is just emotions. And emotions, they've been taught, are always valid and never need to be questioned. Stay with me. This pattern is everywhere, and most men are drowning in it without understanding what's actually happening. The hoarder brain, what happens when thoughts never get sorted. Let me start with an image that makes this pattern immediately visible. Picture a hoarder's house, not the extreme cases you see on TV, just a house where nothing ever gets thrown away, where stuff accumulates in corners, on counters, in closets, where there's no organization, no sorting, no cleaning out, just accumulation. After 20 years, what does that house look like? Cluttered beyond function. You can't find anything when you need it. You can't move freely through the space. You can't use rooms for their intended purpose because they're filled with stuff that should have been dealt with years ago. Now picture that same pattern happening mentally. A brain where thoughts, beliefs, assumptions, emotional reactions just accumulate. Where nothing ever gets evaluated or sorted or thrown out. Where contradictory beliefs exist side by side because they've never been examined closely enough to notice the contradiction. After 20, 30, 40 years of this, what does that mental space look like? Chaos. Complete, utter chaos. This is what I'm talking about. Women who have never taken 20 minutes, not per day, not per week, not per year, but ever, to actually sit down and evaluate their thoughts, their beliefs, their assumptions about how the world works. Most men find this impossible to believe. How can someone go through their entire adult life without ever examining what they actually believe and why? Without ever questioning whether their assumptions are accurate? Without ever sorting through contradictions? But watch closely. Listen to how some women talk. Watch how they make decisions. Observe how they respond to challenges. And you'll see it everywhere. The mental hoarder brain in action. How the chaos manifests. Here's what this looks like in daily life. Contradictory positions held simultaneously, she'll say she wants him to be the leader of the family. Strong, decisive, taking charge. But the moment he makes a decision without consulting her first, she's furious that he didn't ask her opinion. She wants financial security. She wants him to save money, invest, build wealth. But she also wants to spend freely on things that feel good in the moment. And she sees no contradiction between these positions. She says she values honesty and direct communication. But when he's honest about something that bothers him, she punishes him for not being more sensitive to her feelings. These aren't occasional inconsistencies. This is constant, daily operation from contradictory belief sets that have never been examined closely enough to see the contradiction. Emotional reactions that make no sense. He comes home from work. He's tired. He needs 20 minutes to decompress. He's not angry. He's not upset with her. He's just mentally exhausted from the day and needs some quiet. Her response, "Why are you being cold to me? What did I do wrong? Why won't you talk to me?" She's created an entire emotional crisis out of his need for silence. Not because something actually happened, but because the space his silence created allowed her mental chaos to rush in and create a narrative about rejection that has nothing to do with reality. He addresses a legitimate issue. "Hey, we talked about budgeting for this month and we're already over. Can we discuss what happened?" Her response, tears, or anger, or accusations that he's controlling, or pivoting to something he did 3 weeks ago that bothered her, or explaining why the overspending was necessary because of reasons that don't actually address the budget issue. She's not responding to what he said. She's responding to the emotional chaos that got activated when he introduced a topic that would require accountability, creating problems to fill the void. There's a calm weekend, nothing major happening, Just peace, time together, relaxation. She can't tolerate it. The calm creates space for her internal chaos to surface, so she manufactures a problem, brings up an old argument, creates tension over something minor, picks a fight about nothing in particular. He's confused. Things were fine. What happened? What happened is she couldn't sit with peace. Peace requires being comfortable with your own thoughts. Her thoughts are chaos. So she exports the chaos to create external drama that's easier to deal with than internal awareness. This pattern repeats constantly. Every time things get too calm, she destabilizes. Not consciously, not maliciously, but automatically, because chaos is her baseline and calm feels threatening. Why this destroys men? Most men have no idea women can operate like this, because men don't operate like this. When a man has a problem, he identifies it, thinks through solutions, implements one, evaluates results. His thinking is sequential. Problem, analysis, solution, action. When chaos-addicted women have problems, they rarely get to solutions. They get to emotional expression. The problem exists to be felt and discussed and processed, not necessarily solved. So when a man marries a woman operating from mental chaos, he keeps trying to fix problems that aren't meant to be fixed. He keeps offering solutions that get rejected. He keeps trying to create stability that gets disrupted. And it's exhausting, completely exhausting. The drain on his focus every time she creates chaos, his attention gets pulled from what he's building, from his work, from his purpose, from the things he's trying to accomplish. He's thinking about a project at work and she texts him with some emotional crisis that requires immediate attention. He has to context switch, deal with her emotions, calm her down, reassure her. By the time he gets back to his work, he's lost his focus and has to rebuild his mental momentum. This happens daily, multiple times daily. His cognitive resources are constantly being redirected to managing her chaos instead of building anything meaningful. Over years, this absolutely destroys his effectiveness. He's not operating at his capability because half his mental energy is always on standby for the next emotional storm. The confusion, he can't make sense of her behavior. One day she wants 10th, the next day she's upset. He gave her 10th one conversation, she says why matters to her. The next conversation she acts like why is irrelevant. He keeps trying to understand the pattern so he can respond appropriately. But there is no pattern. It's chaos. There's nothing to understand because it's not operating from logic. This confusion corrodes his confidence. He starts second-guessing himself. Maybe he's missing something. Maybe he's not understanding her correctly. Maybe he's the problem. He's not the problem. The chaos is the problem. But he can't see that clearly when he's inside it. The loss of leadership. A man leading a family needs to be able to make decisions, set direction, maintain standards, but every decision gets questioned. Every direction gets challenged. Every standard gets negotiated based on how she feels in the moment. He can't lead effectively when his leadership is constantly undermined by chaos that won't respect structure, so he either becomes passive, just going along with whatever she wants to avoid the conflict, or he becomes harsh, forcing decisions through despite her resistance. Neither of these is actual leadership. Both are reactions to the chaos, and both damage the marriage and his sense of himself as a man. Why she can't see it. Here's the critical part most men don't understand. She genuinely doesn't recognize this as dysfunction because society has given her complete permission to operate this way. Her feelings are always valid. She's been taught since childhood that her feelings are always valid, that she should trust her feelings, that her feelings are her truth, that expressing her feelings is healthy and necessary. Nobody ever taught her that feelings need to be examined, that feelings can be based on false assumptions, that feelings aren't always appropriate responses to reality, that some feelings need to be questioned rather than expressed. So, when she feels anxious about his silence, she believes that anxiety is telling her something true about his emotional state. When she feels angry about the budget conversation, she believes that anger is legitimate and justified. When she feels unsettled by peace, she believes something must be wrong. Her feelings have become the ultimate authority. And feelings generated by mental chaos feel just as legitimate as feelings generated by actual problems. Chaos is normalized. All her friends operate the same way. Her mother operates this way. The women she sees in media operate this way. The relationship advice she reads validates this way of operating. She's surrounded by people who reinforce that her chaos is normal, that men just don't understand emotions, that his requests for peace and logic are him being controlling or emotionally unavailable. The entire support system around her normalizes the dysfunction, so she has no external mirror showing her that this isn't healthy. Accountability feels like attack when he tries to point out contradictions in her thinking. She experiences it as attack. When he asks her to examine her assumptions, she feels criticized. When he suggests she needs to sort through her mental clutter, she hears that he thinks she's broken, because examining her thoughts would require sitting with discomfort, would require admitting she's been wrong about things, would require vulnerability and humility and the terrifying possibility that her entire way of operating needs to change. That's too threatening. So she defends, gets angry, accuses him of being mean or controlling or not accepting her for who she is. The very thing that would help her, accountability and evaluation, is the thing she's most defended against. Real examples, what this looks like. Client 1, the weekend crisis. He planned a nice weekend. Nothing elaborate, just time together. Maybe a hike, a nice dinner, some relaxation. Saturday morning, she's picking fights. About how he loads the dishwasher, about something he said 3 days ago, about plans they made for next month. Nothing makes sense. Everything is a problem. He's confused. He thought she'd enjoy the weekend. Instead, she's turning it into conflict. Here's what's actually happening. The unstructured time created space. That space let her mental chaos surface. She can't sit with it, so she's exporting it as conflict about irrelevant things. By Sunday afternoon, after he's spent the entire weekend managing her emotional chaos, he's exhausted. The weekend meant to recharge him drained him completely. Client 2, the budget conversation, they agreed to a budget. She agreed to it, seemed on board. Week later, she's $800 over in discretionary spending. He brings it up gently. Hey, we talked about this budget. What happened? Her response, are you seriously going to control what I spend? I work too. This is my money. You're being ridiculous. And by the way, you spent money on that tool last month. None of this addresses the actual issue. They had an agreement. She broke it. That's the fact that needs to be discussed. But she can't engage with that fact because engaging with it would require accountability, would require admitting she was wrong, would require examining why she ignored an agreement she made. Easier to create emotional chaos, make him the bad guy, redirect to his spending, and avoid the entire accountability conversation. Client 3, the manufactured drama things are good, really good. They had a great week, connected well, no major issues. He's feeling optimistic about the relationship. Friday night, she brings up something from 2 years ago. Some comment he made that hurt her feelings. She's been thinking about it. She needs to talk about it, right now. The entire evening gets consumed processing this ancient hurt that she chose this exact moment to resurrect. Why now? Why when things are good? Because things being good created calm. Calm is threatening to someone whose baseline is chaos. So she destabilized. Not consciously, but automatically. She doesn't see this pattern. She genuinely believes this old hurt needed to be addressed right now. She has no awareness that she creates these crises precisely when things get too stable. Why this pattern is so hard to change? Here's the brutal truth. Most women operating this way will never change, not because they can't, but because the barriers to change are enormous and they're surrounded by systems that reinforce the dysfunction. What change would require first, she'd have to recognize the pattern, would have to see that her way of operating is creating problems. This requires stepping outside herself and observing her own behavior objectively. Most people can't do this. It's especially difficult for women who've been taught their feelings are always valid, and any criticism of their emotional expression is oppression. Second, she'd have to want to change, not just say she wants to change, actually want it enough to do the uncomfortable work. This means valuing the relationship and his well-being enough to challenge her entire way of being. Most chaos-addicted women don't value stability enough to make this worthwhile. Third, she'd have to sit with intense discomfort. Examining decades of accumulated mental clutter is painful. Finding contradictions in beliefs you've held your entire life is destabilizing. Admitting you've been wrong about fundamental things is humbling. Most people avoid this level of discomfort at all costs. Fourth, she'd have to cut off the validation sources. The friends who tell her she's fine and he's controlling. The social media that reinforces her victimhood. The cultural messages that say her chaos is just feminine energy he needs to accept. Changing would require becoming isolated from the support system that normalizes her dysfunction. Most people won't do that. The likelihood is low without something major happening. Divorce threat, serious consequences, complete breakdown. The likelihood she changes is very, very small. Because changing requires awareness, accountability, and thoughtfulness. Those are exactly the things she's been avoiding for decades. Asking her to suddenly develop them is asking her to become a different person. Some women do it. The ones who hit bottom and recognize they've destroyed something valuable. The ones who have enough humility to admit they've been wrong. The ones who value their husband enough to do the work. But they're rare, very rare. What men need to understand. If you're a man dealing with this pattern, here's what you need to know. You can't fix this. You can't think your way through her chaos for her. You can't organize her thoughts. You can't force her to examine her beliefs. You can't make her accountable if she refuses accountability. This is her work, and she has to choose to do it. You can't do it for her. Stop trying to solve the unsolvable. Stop trying to make sense of the senseless. Stop trying to stabilize what's designed to stay chaotic. Your job isn't to fix her. Your job is to decide whether you can live with this or not. Set boundaries around your peace. You're allowed to say, I'm not engaging with manufactured drama. When you're ready to discuss this calmly, I'm here. You're allowed to say, I need quiet when I get home. That's not rejection. That's self-care. You're allowed to say, we made an agreement. If you want to change it, we can discuss that, but I'm not accepting that the agreement doesn't matter. You're allowed to protect your mental space, your focus, your energy from constant chaos. And if she can't respect those boundaries, that tells you something important about whether this relationship can work long-term. Decide what you're willing to tolerate. Some men can tolerate a certain level of chaos. They've learned to let it wash over them without getting pulled in. They've developed the ability to stay centered while she cycles through her emotional storms. Other men can't. And that's legitimate. You're not required to live in constant chaos because she refuses to do the internal work to create calm. You get to decide what you're willing to live with. And if the answer is not this, you're allowed to say so. Final thoughts. Women's addiction to chaos destroys marriages quietly, not through single dramatic events, but through constant low-level disruption that prevents anything stable from being built. The man who marries this woman finds himself perpetually managing her emotional weather instead of building the life he's capable of building. His focus gets fragmented, his energy gets drained, his leadership gets undermined, and he can't fix it. Because she doesn't see it as a problem, she sees it as just how she is. Just her emotions, just her personality. And everyone around her agrees. The only path forward is her choosing to change, choosing to sit with discomfort, choosing to examine the mental clutter, choosing accountability over validation. Most won't choose it. And men need to understand that clearly so they can make informed decisions about what they're willing to accept. Drop a comment if you recognize this pattern. Men, are you dealing with constant chaos? Women, do you recognize yourself here? Subscribe because this channel examines the patterns destroying marriages that nobody wants to name.